here today. And we would like to talk to you about our audio team at Hazelight and how we collaborated on It Takes Two to create both technical and creative innovations by using the various talents within the team and bringing all those skills together. My name is Anne-Sophie Mongeau, and I'm a senior sound designer at Hazelight.
My name is Philip Eriksson, and I am the lead sound designer. So what is our team like? First of all, this team is a very young team. We built this team during It Takes Two, and none of us had worked at Hazelight before this project, except for our in-house composer Gustav Grefberg. The first to join was me in the position as the lead sound designer. I quickly had to start recruiting the rest of the talents that I saw were needed to create this game. Soon after, our senior sound designer Anne-Sophie, who is with me today, joined, and then we got our technical sound designer Joachim, and we could start our audio production. We started about 6 months plus into production of It Takes Two, and we started from scratch. For example, we had no audio engine, no nothing. These are the team members that were in-house. We picked around 7 people with different skill sets during It Takes Two. We believe that against all odds and despite the time pressure that we were on, we managed to build a team that functioned in such an optimal way that it exceeded all expectations.
To talk a little bit about our team structure, I want to borrow the 33% model suggested by Rob Bridget in his latest book, Leading with Sound, that you can see on screen right now. So to put it in very simple terms, the 33% model says that game audio consists in equal parts of creative arts, software development, and audio production. If we translate that into a pie chart model, this means that game audio skills can be divided like this: 33% collaborative, 33% technical, and 33% creative. So overall, our audio team very much follows this 33% model, which means we have a balanced set of skills within the team. But we would like to explain how we believe that our collaborative success is a result of maintaining this overall balance while also navigating this line between having generalists and specialists within the team. To be clear, our team is neither made up of multiple generalists nor of multiple specialists, but rather something in between. So as you can see on the screen now, our lead, for example, is taking on more of the collaborative tasks. Our senior sound designer focuses more on the creative part, and our technical sound designer, of course, focuses on the technical side. This, of course, is just an example and does not represent 100% of the team. But what we're trying to show with this is how we all have an area of specialty where other members of the team can rely on us to push the quality bar further, while also being competent in the other skills, which makes the Hazelight audio team look something like this overall. In equal parts, creative, technical, and collaborative, on the whole, but where each part is made up of individuals who demonstrate stronger skills in one of these areas, while still maintaining expertise in all other areas, so without falling into 100% specialists in each skill. We believe that navigating this line between generalists and specialists has meant that we were able to push the quality bar further overall than if we were all on the same level across all skill sets.
What did we do with this team? What did we need to accomplish? And what did we need to create? We will play a part of a trailer to show you a bit of what this game is really about.
Do you want to know what this story is really about? Huh? This is the story of Cody and May.
Why'd you look like a blob of clay?
Wanna change back? Then you need to fix your relationship.
One can have a dream, baby.
Two can make that dream so this is a story of passion.
I
think I'm gonna throw up.
Oh, you're a doll, Cody. You've nothing to throw up.
Told you.
It takes two, baby.
This is a story of attraction. You feel it?
I feel stuck.
It was a spell, I am telling you.
If it is a spell,
how do we break it?
Okay, I got this. Give me some space, I need to think.
This is a story of collaboration!
How comes you get all the cool gadgets?
Because I'm cooler than you, Cody.
A split-screen game. Obviously, It Takes Two can be defined as more than just a split-screen game. It is an action-adventure puzzle platformer, an animated romantic comedy, a linear story with insane amounts of content variety. But the elephant in the room for us was that we had to make sound for a split-screen game.
So, presented with such an ambitious project, we first sat down together and wrote down our dreams and our goals when it came to the audio vision. First of all, it was very clear that none of us wanted to settle for a good enough split-screen sounding game. Our team was just as ambitious as the project itself, and we quickly set ourselves the goal of creating the best split-screen sounding game ever made so far. And you will be the judge of that, but that was at least our goal. So first we had a Pixar quality bar. The animation and art style clearly asked for a Pixar type of sound design, which is grounded in reality but with some humor and exaggeration, but also without falling into comical or too cartoony. Also bigness, coolness, and wow moments. The game itself is extremely varied in terms of content and narrative development, providing countless opportunities for sound design to reinforce those cool moments. So we wanted to jump on those opportunities and create moments that would stand out, making people feel and think, wow, this is cool. We also wanted to follow the drama and be emotional. So just like a Pixar movie, It Takes Two has its tear-jerking moments and a narrative with intimate twists. So it was important to support that tone and not fall into just plain comedy. Music, of course, played an important role in that too. And also immersive. We wanted to make the world immersive by making it believable rather than purely realistic. And given the style of It Takes Two, that meant there was a lot of room for exaggeration, making things sound literally larger than life. And finally, about the split screen, it was to use it to our advantage to serve the narrative and to not let it become an obstacle to good audio.
About the split screen, the challenges that came with it were rather obvious. There was no point dwelling on them, so we jumped straight to the opportunities. What kind of opportunities did this project present us with? Where could we take advantage of what makes this project special in order to achieve our goals? As sound designers, we quickly saw that the mix would be a very important factor in making split screen work. Some of the opportunities consisted of making deliberate choices about which sounds are most important and should be prioritized to lead the narrative. Using the sound to guide players and help clarifying the visual information by emphasizing on selected important elements. Use the screen as a narrative frame for sound design. We call this sonic real estate. We utilized a lot of the left, center, right speaker for the mix and built sound sequences that may be a little bit alike how you build up them for a movie. We will talk about this more later in the presentation. We also found opportunities in exploring worldizing solutions that reinforce the world and the immersive experience. Exploring prioritization solutions that allowed for dynamic audio content. We used Wise HDR, for example. Providing spaces and moments for sound effects, music, and VO to shine and let the others shine based on the narrative development. And we will also talk about this a little bit later in the presentation. We will present our spotting sessions. Where did we start our journey of actually developing the soundscape for this game? We wanted to start with the fundamental part of the soundscape, ambiences. Our intention was that the ambiences would make the world rich, and we set the same goals for ambiences as any other regular single-player game. because why would split screen be any different? Like we said, we never ever wanted to compromise and just make it good enough.
So we started by creating good, rich ambience content and put it in the game to see what would happen and how it would feel in split screen. And that was the first step of our collaborative process between creative needs and technical solutions to eventually make it work nicely in split screen. Our first learning was that quads should not rotate with the world as they do in many single-player games. So if the quads would rotate, or in other words, the quads are remaining static in relation to the world while the player's perspective is rotating, it may be accurate for one player, but for the other, it means the background ambient sounds are starting to move around without any apparent cause. So to fix this, we simply decided to let the quads be static, meaning regardless of the player movement, they will always play in the same 4 channels. We chose to leave it that way so that we could spend more time supporting other split-screen solutions. For instance, we knew we would need to support players being in 2 or more ambient zones at the same time. And letting them both play, so both quads play in all channels, made the mix noisy and made it difficult for the 2 different players to relate to what they hear and to make sense of it. And at the same time, deciding to remove the ambiences from the other player's side felt equally difficult to relate to, because what kind of ambience only sounds in the left ear, for instance. So the question was, how can we make the ambiences sound better in split screen and keeping them just as rich and convincing as any other game, and also without compromising on fidelity and detail. So before explaining our solutions in more detail, we want to illustrate with a comparison video just how messy it can be and it can sound when leaving the ambiences to play without tackling those questions. So the video is divided in 2. The first part shows quads playing without any special treatment, and the second part shows the quads playing after we've enabled our haze quad panning solution. In the second part, you will be able to see on the volume meters how each ambience is basically lower on the opposite side when the haze quad panning is enabled. And after this video, we will explain in more details how this was achieved.
When it comes to sound, most often less is more. We did not simply just want to layer the 2 quads on top of each other because it would become noisy and we would lose details. We instead wanted to scoop out the parts of the quads that layer on top of each other to create space for each ambience, but we needed to find a good balance so that we didn't lose the surround feel. In this scenario, you see that the left player, May, is in an ice cave and the right player, Cody, is in a tree room. Clearly 2 very different environments, like the previous example with the above and below water. When the players are in 2 different zones, you see that the mix in 5.1 is split in the middle. The answer in simple terms is that we pan the quads slightly to their respective player's side. This means that they are still playing on the other player's side, but 6 dB lower, which make them feel stronger to one side without removing them completely from the other. The solution was very simple when it came to players being in the same zone. We only play 1 quad for both players like you would do in a single player game, but statically. No world orientation for this quad.
And this strategy of splitting up the surround mix was something that we saw would be useful for many other types of sounds as well. We will talk more about other solutions based on the same idea a little bit later. But for instance, we use the same behavior for the random generated spot sounds, and those are basically an added layer to the ambience quads that provide some variety and make the ambiences more interesting. And those spot sounds are spawned in 3D within the world and follow the same panning logic, so where they will sound slightly louder on their own player's side. This zone-based system was born from our design goals of creating ambiences that sound just as good as a single-player game, where the creative designers in the team brought up the creative needs and the technical designers enabled us to realize our goals. This system was used not only for quads and spot sounds, but also our environment type system as well as occlusion. And this is where we come to another one of our key collaborative feature, the worldizing system, which would be a significant part of how the world would sound in split screen. We believed that making the world more convincing would make the game feel more immersive and so allow the players to forget about the split screen more easily. Our worldizing system is using the ambience zones to determine a specific reverb to assign, as well as a type of environment. And this environment in turn selects what kind of settings of raycast delay reflections to use, and which designed reflection tails should be played. We'll talk a little bit more on that later. Also, in addition to the material-specific footsteps, we have two unique additive layers for the player footsteps, so for large and small indoor environments. But what is special about our system is that it has to consider the listener position of both players and determine what to play based on that. It's not really possible to take both perspectives into account at the same time and for it to still make sense. So one of the many learnings of creating a split-screen game is that a mix of both perspectives together usually ends up being a less clear mix. So things need to be prioritized, and hard choices need to be made based on what feels best when playing the game. And most commonly, our solutions when it came to deciding what to prioritize has come down to favoring each player's own perspective. This means that a player will hear sounds that belong to them based on their own perspective, and the other player's perspective is basically ignored.
We will now present our worldizing system, and we will start with the delay. The raycast delay system from the players originates from the players. We trace from each player and pan those delay reflections according to a strategy. I will show a picture in the next slide. The left player may, as you see, has two traces, one towards the left and one towards the right. When we pan those reflections, the left one will be played through the front left and the rear left speakers, and the right trace will be played between the center and the right speaker. We did this to again follow the split screen with the sound to create a slight ownership of those sounds. The right player Cody is of course the complete opposite. The raycast delay system is living its own life in runtime, but a designer could set up a rule set per environment type to tame the trace data that we receive to make it more suitable for a respective space. We of course get things like distance to the trace hit to determine the delay time, but also material data so that we can filter out, for example, high frequencies if the trace hits an absorbent material, such as wood like you see in the picture. Since our goal was to make a believable world, we felt like this really helped conveying the feel that you hear what you see. If there is a reflective surface that you see, you will also hear it.
In addition to these runtime delay reflections, we also decided to go one step further into worldizing and add reflection tails. And those are designed assets meant to be layered in-game with selected large sounds such as explosions, weapons, and certain gadgets. And those assets are designed to include many variations, meaning various types of spaces, but also many variations of the same space. They are also meant to provide a sense of size, which means we designed reflection tails to accommodate for both small and large sources, and each of those will also select a reflection type based on the type of environment, which can include, for example, indoor large, indoor small, outdoor field, outdoor canyon, and so on. The environment type is determined by where the sound source is, whether it is the player, for instance, when they shoot their weapon, or a different source like an explosion, for example. And we have designed those reflection tails to sound larger than life, following our goals of making this environment immersive, not through pure realism, but through believability and bigness. In other words, if the players are firing their weapon in a large space, we want them to really feel the largeness of the space. We don't want it to be subtle. As for the reverb, our finding was that it worked well to let the sounds themselves decide where they are and what reverb to use. This means the sound will select the reverb that is associated with whichever zone it is in at the time. And this also means that the player-centered sounds, such as movement and abilities, will be processed through the reverb the player is currently located in. We also chose not to tie the reverb to the environment type system, but rather to the zone themselves. And this is to provide us, the designers, with as much flexibility as possible to basically mix and match and design reverb impulse responses that would fit each space as best as possible. And now to emphasize on the creative innovations for our worldizing system, we'd like to mention that all our impulse responses for the convolution reverb were recorded and designed by us for each space. Philip went even as far as building his own whip to record them. And so when combining both the technical and creative innovations of this worldizing system, we could create a truly unique environment, realistic and convincing when they needed to be, and also weird or unconventional when the game asked for that type of environment. So now we have a video that is narrated by Philip, and it's showing a few examples of that system.
Let's start by listening to some reverb. I will play an impulse response and then some voice routed through that reverb. The first example is an indoor hall.
Coming through, lovebirds! Whoa! Come on over!
The first example was rather realistic, but the next one is one of our designed reverbs for the inside of a kaleidoscope.
Oh, finally! What is this place?
If we now combined the reverb and the designed reflection tails for this cannon sound, it can sound like this in a large cave. And like this in an outdoor field environment type. In this in-game example, reverb and raycast delay will be the things to focus on.
You know, I wonder where that annoying book even came from.
He said Rose bought him.
Well, he doesn't sound like a book she would buy.
Oh, more like a pretentious self-help book you'd buy.
You know, self-help books are very important to some people, okay?
Last but not least, another in-game example with an explosion in two different environment types. One smaller tunnel, and the second one of the biggest rooms in all of It Takes Two. Now that we have the ambience and the worldizing foundation covered, then comes the time to think about how 3D sounds would behave in split screen. Out of the box, our audio engine simply used the closest listener to dictate where and how a sound would be spatialized. This worked to some extent, but could create some unintuitive scenarios. For instance, if May is looking straight at the sound source, but Cody is standing closer to it with his back towards it, this meant that the sound will be played in the rear channels, even though as players we only see the sound source from May's screen, straight ahead. This meant that the small sound source could play in both front and rear speakers, which made it feel extremely wide and huge, because it was full surround. To give you a little bit of insight, we actually did not treat this issue until quite late in the production, since the issue was mostly obvious in surround. But towards the end, we could prioritize this, and it made the experience a lot more polished. Here are a few pictures of scenarios that could be problematic. What happens when a sound comes from the right of May but the left of Cody? What happens when a sound comes from behind May but is in front of Cody? What happens when Cody is closer to the sound but only May sees it? This was what we aimed to solve with our Haze 3D panning.
To put it simply, our Haze 3D panning considers the most relevant listener instead of simply the closest. The most relevant listener is determined based on a combination of the distance and the listener angle. So the closest listener will determine attenuation, and the listener with the closest forward angle to the position of the sound source will determine panning. This means basically that the player who is looking the most straight at the sound source will dictate how this object is being spatialized and in what channels it's supposed to play. But if there is a player standing closer to the source, they will dictate how far away this sound should be. So we'll now show a video with a simple example of how our Haze 3D panning works practically in the game, where we have a 3D sound source that is soloed, and you can try and pay attention to the meters in the center of the screen showing the levels in all the surround channels. So just in case you didn't have time to clearly see what was going on with the meters in the video, here are a few screenshots that are taken from that same video. And the first scenario is quite simple. Both player cameras are looking towards the sound source, and this is pretty intuitive, and it follows exactly the same principle as a single player game. Basically, it means the sound comes from the front. In this other scenario, it's also quite simple. Both player cameras are looking away from the sound source, so the sound comes from the back. And now it's getting a little bit more interesting. The closest player is looking towards the sound source, while the most distant player is looking away from it. As you see on the level meters, we maintain all the signal in the front channels. So we basically prioritize May's perspective, because she's looking at the sound source, and ignore Cody's so that we don't have any signal in the rear channels. And this last scenario is the most problematic one that we wanted to fix, and that you'd never encounter in a single player game. Basically, the closest player is looking away from the sound source, and a distant player is looking towards it. But there again, we prioritize the listener direction, so the player who's looking at the sound source over the distance for the panning. But we keep the distance to the sound source of the closest player for the attenuation.
So far, we have spoken quite a lot about panning and spatialization, but ironically, It Takes Two is one of the least spatialized games. Due to the split screen itself, in order to reduce confusion concerning the source of a sound, many sounds are better left non-spatialized, in fact as many as possible. And we only spatialize when we really have to. With the static 2D panning, non-spatialized sounds, we still wanted to follow the split screen with the left and the right ownership of the sounds. We use the center speaker a lot more for sounds than a traditional game would do. This was to spread each half of the mix and still get some stereo feel. Some sounds that are non-spatialized include player abilities, sounds that are coming from the players themselves, weapons that are used by the players, scripted events or one-shot things that could only occur when players are looking at it, interactables, objects that the player interact with that is within their direct environment. VO was panned slightly to the left and to the right, but stayed in the front. Player movement followed exactly the same thing, slightly to the left and slightly to the right. We also took inspiration from cinema mixing, where the main part of the mix is kept left, center, right, and only less important flavor sounds like ambiences and reverb are played through the rear speakers. This also helped with making the sounds feel like they belong to the screen for our game. This was inspiration that we applied to our game, but we had more than just reverb and ambiences in the rear speakers. This mostly applied for the non-spatial sounds. We will show a video of two weapons which are panned to the left and to the right, and you will again see the level meters with the surround channels to make the panning clearer. All that being said, we are talking about static panning, because it meant to be set and not changed. But It Takes Two being what it is, this is not true in all cases. We won't be able to go into depth in this topic, but we wanted to mention it. So even if sounds were made 2D non-spatial, we used a parameter for the static panning so that we could change it in different perspectives. Every individual perspective can have either a static point or be a flexible sound on the 2D plane. We also modified this depending if you're listening in speakers, in surround, or in headphones to make the 2D panning slightly less 100% to the left and to the right in the headphones. Some sections that differ are the top-down dungeon crawler, where we measure the middle point on the screen to the player and pan them according to where they are on the screen. Both players on the same vehicle facing forward, where we kept it left, center, right, but depending on where the vehicle is on the screen, we move it slightly to the left and to the right. A horizontal split, the sound will be played from the front in the middle for both players, and we even have single screen parts, showing only one player, which is pretty simple. We just keep it in the center. We will show a video with a few examples of these different 2D pannings.
Wow! I'm starting to like this place. Look at these amazing colors, Cody!
Yeah, it's like a freaking double rainbow in here! Why does everything have to be a roller coaster?
We would like to finish with an example of a purely creative collaborative feature. It Takes Two has more than one fast-paced sequence characterized by a lot of content variety, quick change in gameplay, and where players are being thrown here and there in order to move forward towards their goal. So throughout the entire game, but for those types of busy sequences especially, we made it a point to gather the entire audio team and do spotting sessions together. And during those sessions, we would play through a specific section of the game and decide together what should be in the spotlight and when. This is so that despite the busyness of the sequence, especially considering that you're following 2 characters through it at the same time, we wanted to make sure that sound effects, music, and video could all play a role in the narrative development. We also wanted to use the natural progression of the sequence to determine which of those 3 should be dominating at which moments, so that overall we are creating a dynamic and evolving storytelling through sound.
To illustrate this, we have prepared a video. It's monologued by me, but this was collaborative. We played through the game together with the composers, VO designers, and the whole sound team, voiced opinions and ideas about where we could do something to benefit the mix and the experience. Even technical obstacles were brought up during this so that we could consider this into our plans. So it was not purely a creative spotting session. We also had other things that were included. In the video, we will highlight various elements of the mix, music and sound effect stems, and the full mix including VO, to try to describe our collaborative decisions for this section of the game. This video is not to show off the mix, but rather to give an insight in what thoughts we had before making this sequence. Alright, I will give you some insight into our collaborative spotting sessions. First, to let you know where we come from, May and Cody just got into the last part of a time-themed level. We come from a very busy part just before this intro cutscene, so we wanted the actual gameplay of the level to start rather soft to create some breathing space and a well-deserved rest for the players. Let's start by listening to only the music stem. As you hear, we thought it was good to make a very soft ambient music for this first part. We decided to leave out all types of percussive elements. You will hear why. So instead of letting the music take the tick-tock clock part, we decided to leave that for the sound effects. Towards the end of this long walk, we need to start creating intensity, and the rest is done for a while. We mostly do this with music. We build tempo and stress with the music and the sound effects, but leave space in the sound effect stem to let the music through. We quickly move forward in the sequence of events, where we take the opportunity to take down mostly the volume intensity, so that we have room to grow and build back up in the next sequence. During the freefall, we felt like it was the perfect moment to create intensity and story with the VO.
What the heck, mate? What do we do now?
We kept the sound effects tight and focused to not take too much space. Why not make it easy for yourselves and fake it when you can? This part is driven only by the sound effects. But we of course needed some help from the music to get back to it. This is a rather complicated puzzle part. Simply, we have short reverse moments again. So instead of creating a complex reverse music system, we lower the music quite fearlessly. And do it with baked sound effects instead. Here we let the music tail out and lose its tempo to create space for the biggest explosion. no music at all here. After this pretty intense part, we land in a section where time almost stands still.
Cody? You okay? Are you doing this?
We want to be able to create weird feelings with the pitched voices and let the music be the ambience of this part. The sound effects guide the players forward with hints of directional information when moving the timeline forwards or backwards. But most of all, we just want to create a really cool experience for the players. Now you might think that the mix is very low in volume, but that is purposefully made.
Cody! Come on!
We are about to get really loud again.
Take this, Mark!
In with the loud sound effects and all the other elements of the mix hit the players right in the face. But then start removing some of the noisy sounds again to leave space for epic music to drive pretty much the rest of this scene.
Me too! I've had enough of you, Clock!
Yeah, let's do it!
Emotion and epicness was our goal, even though we are listening to only the music stem. We only have sounds for some things like the reversed class. It Takes Two was not only about making cool sounds or making systems. It was about the combination of them both. We did this through collaboration. By combining creator insights with technical skills, we pushed the quality bar as far as we could with this game. And that was what we wanted to tell you with this presentation.
Thank you everyone for watching this presentation. And if you are interested to know more, you have resources that are listed here on screen. And you can, of course, reach out to us if you have further questions.
And we are live. Anne-Sophie, Philip, thank you for a wonderful presentation. Welcome to DevGAMM Fall. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much for inviting us. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. And the presentation itself, I mean, it takes two to make a great presentation. So thank you guys again.
It does.
Yeah, so again, the presentation was in mono, as people noticed in chat, but the game is not in mono. So you should definitely play it if you did not. I mean, our viewers. So we have a few questions for you guys. I actually have a couple of mine questions for you, but let me start with those which were asked in chat. And I want to remind that you can still submit your questions right now to chat because they are right here, the people who can answer those. Okay, so guys, do you have procedural sound generation directly in the game itself?
We didn't actually do any procedural stuff at all, you could say. It's a little bit depending on where you sort of draw the borders between like designed and procedural. Like we have a lot of sounds that are driven with different parameters and so on. Like pretty much everything in the game has some sort of parameter from the game modifying the sound in some sort of way. But we didn't do anything that was like purely procedural.
Right, absolutely. Thank you. Next one is from Bogdan. I actually had the same one. So did you test your audio system in game with players somehow? And in general, how long did it take you to make all those tests? Because you did so many incredible things in this game and obviously you had to test them all.
Yeah, so we had some playtests actually where people listened to the game. We also actually had some of the outsourcing people that we worked with, Red Pipe Studios, who helped us with the cutscenes. They mostly looked at the cutscenes and worked on them, but we did play through the game with them since they are audio professionals and got some feedback from them as well as other players that we invited to the studio and also did the playtest. So we got some feedback and so on from them, but mostly I guess it was ourselves.
Yeah, the secret is we played over and over and over again. I don't think we can count how many times we have played this game.
Yeah.
And the second part of the question was how much time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there is a follow-up question of how long have you been making all the sounds for this project?
Yeah, so the audio team started on this project about 6 months-ish into the production of the game. And the whole production lasted for about 3 years. So that leaves us about 2.5 years to work on this. Like we said in the presentation, though, we started from absolute scratch. So we had to start with making, systems, developing and like the audio engine and all that stuff. So we didn't start like right away making sounds, but we had to start pretty early, pretty fast because we had a lot of content to make, as you can see. So like it was a 2.5 years very stacked with sound making and tools development.
Oh yeah. And actually recruiting at the same time as well, since it was just me and Gustav Grettberg who started, and then everyone joined like within 6 months to like even a year. So we had some people joining really late as well.
How many of people?
We were in-house, what did we say? 7 or 8, yeah. At maximum.
This is just a sound team.
Yeah.
Great.
And that includes people working with voices, programming for audio, and the composers as well. So the whole team that took care of only the sounds, basically.
Wow, such a great job. Okay, moving on. Bogdan asks, no, we already had this, sorry. Okay, Eugene, question from Eugene. Do you decide which listener is used dynamically or attach listener to sound at spawning?
Yeah, I saw this question during the presentation. Thank you for asking. So since the players can move around freely in the world all the time, we need to do this dynamically. So the answer to your question is we do it dynamically for all the spatial sounds, but we decide like not dynamically when a sound is like non-spatial or spatial. So that we decide in wise straight away when we actually make the sound. But the sounds that are 3D in the world, they need to be dynamic because Cody and May can, of course, walk around in the world freely, be close or distant, or look at the sound or not look at the sound. So that needs to be in runtime, basically.
Okay, right. Okay, another one from Alexei. Well, I'm trying to translate it, but yeah, I'm not a sound expert anyhow. So maybe you have some peculiarities about the sound mixing, actually. How do you work with the mixing of your audio for such projects? Can you share some insights?
Yeah, so I guess first off, like we kind of, you need to familiarize yourself with the soundscape. So when we started the game, like we really sat down and like talked about how we would make the sounds. It's a lot more than just like dragging faders up and down and changing volumes up and down. You need to be, like one unit, have a clear like decision and direction for the game. So that is the first step, and that is actually the most important step, I would say. And having feedback sessions, playing together, like we said with these spotting sessions, we sat down, all of us, and decided like, okay, let's make a big explosion here, and let the music be nice here, and let the players speak a lot during this part, and so on. So mixing actually starts a lot earlier than when you even have sounds, I would say. Then maybe you can take a little bit about like how we actually had to mix it together because it's a split screen game. So you had to be 2 players.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, the big question is also the mix in regards to the split screen, and because there are two players and the screen is separated. And that is something that we had to decide pretty early, or not decide, but kind of have a vision at least. And then it took a little bit of experimentation, but we knew that we wanted to develop or establish some kind of ownership of the sounds for each player. I mean, we obviously went into that a little bit in the presentation, but so the idea is really to send all of the sounds that belong to the left player on the left side of the screen, and all the sounds that belong to the right player on the right side of the screen. But that, is not 100%. Obviously, we don't do complete, left and right, because that would sound completely weird. So it's all about the balance and which sounds are going to go, are going to be owned towards, their sides, and which sounds are actually going to be left to play in the center. In order to get also that nice balance, they're like the sounds from the players, they're not, like I said, it's not 100% on the left. So you kind of bleed into the center. Both sides bleed into the center as well. So it's all about finding that right balance between sound ownership of each player.
Yeah, and then it was basically just playing the game over and over and over and over again. And Anne-Sophie played as May, I played as Cody, Anne-Sophie played we swapped, we played over network, everything. And then it's just a feeling. It's like, okay, so, what do we think that the players want to hear right now? Or what makes it more thrilling or more impactful or dramatic and fun, of course. So it was really just like playing it a lot and just trying to have your psych up and feel like a player, like what do I want to hear, what is nice. So it's a lot about that.
Yeah, it's probably the key to creating every single game. Just play it as many times as you can. And I like how, exactly. By the way, guys, I just like how your how your screen is now split into two parts.
Yeah.
The black one and the white one.
It's like an illusion though.
Yeah. Okay, we have some few more minutes for another question. What's more difficult part to tackle? Produce all the sounds needed to fill the game, or the technical parts behind implementing the sounds in the game?
It's kind of 50-50 if you ask me. That's why we need a balanced team with all the skills within it. Because, me and Philip together, if it was just the two of us doing everything, we could have, bombarded the game with all the sounds and just produced everything. But half of them would have made it in because, we wouldn't have had the technical support to make it work. But since we had also a technical sound designer and an audio programmer, who helped us on that front, then, us doing the whole working as a team, made it so it was possible. Because if you would ask, them to produce, to make the game together, then the game would have all sorts of fancy systems but barely any sound in it whatsoever. So it's really important to marry those two things. And so that's why we don't have a team that's stronger on the sound design side or stronger on the technical side. We really kind of have matching sort of skill sets in that regard, so that we can really push on all fronts all together.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It would not have sounded as nice if it would have been 8 people of me, 8 copies. No, you need different skill sets, different angles, different, creative minds and so on. Then you actually make something really unique. And then you should, of course, still feel like one organism, but you need all kinds of expertise.
Yeah, that sounds right. I think I found the perfect question to finish with. And it's a personal one for both of you. So guys, what inspires you to work with sound?
Do we have another hour? Or?
Yeah, exactly.
Just a few seconds, I believe.
I can at least say that I love when things I feel the sound. When I look at the picture, I don't feel the picture really, but sound for me, it's so tactile and it's so impactful. That is why I at least get so thrilled when making sounds. So that's a really, really short answer, but that's one of the things that really tickle me at least.
I have to agree that it's about the emotional connection to what you see. I think that beautiful visuals are only ever going to be beautiful visuals until you put sound on them, and then it becomes immersive and it becomes something emotional that I can relate to. So similar.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for your beautiful answers, for your presentation, and for another game in my wish list, because, well, what I saw was really, really incredible.
Yeah,
thank you, guys.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
It's
Thank
been
you.
a pleasure. We will be glad to have you back at DevGAMM. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you. Bye bye.